So my day job is farming, and I want to explain this before I get really into what I'm going to talk about today. I want to explain this because, it is important. Everyone on the farm, they're allowed to stay as long as they please, as long as they are friendly and don't bother anybody. This is Ravenwing. He's been here for almost 6 years now, and he has been our matriarchal kind of rooster, if you will. He's been the grandfather, that watches over everything. He's getting up there in years, but and same thing with our hens. If our hens stop laying, it's an egg farm. If our hens stop laying, we don't cull them, we just let them be. The only time I have to cull is when they're mean. So our chickens are in milk right now, and that's our other rooster, Devor. He actually gets along quite well with the Ravenwing, but he's a frizzle on top of that, so they're basically, frizzles look like they have a bad hair day all the time, much less when they're molting. And do feel free to look it up, what a frizzle is for yourself, because there is a lot of information about just what that genetic thing does to their feathers. But anyway, yes, we try our very best to make sure that, they live full lives. And most people, they got an egg farm. If the hen stops laying, they cull it. Well, we never do that. We give them, they have a whole half of their life that they're not yet spent, and we think that they deserve to have their entire life, as long as they are docile and get along with everybody. We even, like I said, have 2 different roosters coexisting with one another because they're docile and they get along. So we do our very best, even with roosters, to make sure, that it is as humane as possible. That being said, every once in a while we have chickens that really are hell-bent on making everybody else, suffer the brunt of their dominance, and are so mean that they are actually a threat to the rest of the flock. They're so much of a threat that they could potentially kill other members of the flock. And when you get some that are that mean, whether they're roosters or hens, it doesn't matter. If they're that mean, obviously they cannot be allowed to live within the flock, right? So typically you can sense the personality within a few weeks time. You can sense them as really little, but then sometimes roosters that do not get mean until they mature, every once in a while that happens. Most of the time though, you can see it, you can sense it, and as being pagan, we never leave anything to assumption. So what I'll do is I'll actually look into their eyes, and I will pick them up and hold them up and look really closely at them, into their eyes, to see, okay, what is the nature of their soul, what is their, just to double check and make sure that if you see malice in their eyes, if you see selfishness in their eyes, if you see that kind of evil eye, I can't really explain it, but in paganism it said the eyes are a gateway to the soul, and that you can see, in anyone or anything's eyes, what their soul is, based off of looking into their expressions and things. So and right here, this is actually Raven. She's coming up. She's actually very friendly, but she wants something to eat. But it's something that you have to really train for, and you don't just go off of that. You go off of that plus their behaviour, and that's what determines whether or not they actually get put to butcher. And I'd say about 98% do not get set to butcher. Most of them actually are allowed to just kind of coexist, with everything and everyone. And that's the same thing with our quail and everything else that we have. But when they are set to butcher, there's this a thing where you don't waste anything in paganism. You don't waste anything at all. And look at that, Raven is actually doing a good job of it. just displaying not to waste anything. She's found a tiny little puddle of water in the grass, what most humans would go unnoticed, and she's utilised that tiny little puddle as, you know, something to drink from before it gets absorbed into the ground. You know, it's kind of interesting that she decided to do that. Or I'm told to give back to nature or something. Usually means that, you know, an animal, a scavenger, needs it, and so usually what I'm told to do is any organs or anything like that, leave up to nature. But you know, the meat and the bones is usually what goes to me. And so after I've eaten the meat, you know, I'm left with this, right? I'm left with that, and you know, to most people that is nothing, you know. But actually this is a whole nother meal. You just have to cook it right. And before you start, you know, trying to tell me you can't eat bone, you better just wait, because I can show you that you can, as long as you cook it right. Even before you set it in the oven to cook, you know, you can actually eat the ends off, which is what I've done, because they're you know, not sharp, so you can eat those ends off like I've done there. But only the ends at this point are not sharp. You have to cook it a certain way to make sure that the rest of it is not sharp. By the way, I would never take out bones if I thought that the chickens knew what it was. In fact, if I were to throw this on the ground right now, they would probably eat it. Unfortunately, they would not know, and they would probably just eat it. Because anything shiny, and this is technically shiny, I don't know if you can see, yes, they would just eat it. So they're not mortified at all. But of course, when I butcher, always when I butcher, I never let them see anything, because I don't want to upset them. So we've got this right here, mostly bone. Sometimes I do a bit better job, you know, trimming some of this flesh off before, and by trimming I mean actually eating beforehand. But you don't have to. You can actually leave some of the flesh on when you do this, and it actually makes the bones a bit more tasty. So we're just going to go and put it right back in the oven. Up to this point you would have cooked it normally. You're going to see that right back in the oven like that. And we're going to wait for them to get really, really crispy, to the point where they just crumble in your mouth, and they're not sharp at all. Yes, you're going to have some that are a little too hard. So you should never try to swallow if they're sharp and hard, but anything that just naturally crumbles in your mouth like that, and usually the thinner ones will get done first. We'll eat the thinner ones, and then the thicker, harder ones will get put in a second time. So altogether up to 3 times that you might have to put it back in here. It's a fine line of making it crispy but not black and burnt. They actually do taste remarkably good, especially if you got some sauce on it like we do. That bone marrow is actually really good for you anyway. But again, disclaimer, not for everyone. There can be sharp little shards that do not crumble, and that can be a digestive issue if it doesn't crumble and you don't chew it well. If you don't have the teeth to chew it well, you know, just have some common sense here. Don't swallow anything sharp or hard. But yeah, you do this, what I'm about to do, and I'd say at least 90% of it will turn the bone edible. Okay, so this is just my oven, but if you do this for, let's change the time here to about, let's see, how many, it's different for how thick the bones are. I think let's change it to that, and then we'll check it in that amount of time and see what happens. And then check it about in the middle, just to make sure it's not going to overcook. You always got to check it, you know, as with anything. But that's, you know, what we're going to do for that amount and that thickness, and then that will do the thinner ones, and then we'll put we'll put the thicker ones back in after that a third time. But this is for getting anything that's thinner. The degree on here, unfortunately, is just in Fahrenheit, so unfortunately, just, you know, if you're in a different country, just ignore. But the degree here depends on your specific oven. You know, I have had some that is substantially lower than that. Keep in mind as well, these are 8-week-old cullings. If you're doing, you know, a full-grown chicken, that is going to take a lot more time than just a small culling. Like, sometimes the only way to truthfully test it is to bite down and see. But you can see that a lot of those, you know, look pretty brittle, and so I'm going to eat the thinner ones, and then I'll show you what's left that we'll have to put back in. That's about what's left. So these will have to go back in a second time. So now we're on the third time of cooking, technically, and again it's that fine line between, you know, blackened, burnt, and just crispy. So we're going to do the same exact thing again. We'll put it back in, and then, you know, you'll see about at least 90% of it I'll be able to eat. So I just took it out of the oven for the second time. It would be difficult to put it in again because at this point, you know, it starts actually getting burnt if you put it in again. So whatever I'm able to eat out of this will be all that I can salvage. Anything that doesn't crumble, I just won't be able to eat, and I'll put back into the earth. There's a crunching sound in it, but I'm not sure I'm actually eating it. No one wants to see my disgusting lips as I eat, but yeah, and it starts getting a bit hard. So that's about what's left. No, that's about what's left. Yeah. So yeah, that I can't chew. You wouldn't want to swallow. That's too hard, too sharp. Excuse me while I do this with all of these, and then fast forward. Technically I could eat in a little bit more, but you see there's really black ones. They're so blackened that they would be really, really bitter because they're that burnt. And so yeah, technically you could, but it could taste horrible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the rest of this back to the earth. But see, I made a whole nother meal just out of that alone. Very little was left that I could not eat. I'm going to put it where it wants it, so that's, for whatever reason, that's where it wants to be. So that's where we're going to put it. You always have to put it wherever the earth, wherever the land wants it. So that's where the land wants it for some odd, strange reason. I don't know why.